refer to inner jihad, which means what? Inner striving. Striving against what? If it is violence, then inner jihad means to put a gun in your head and shoot. That's nothing to do with violence. Inner jihad here means to strive against evil inclination in us as human beings. Jealousy, pride, oppression, hate. And these are much harder than pushing a button from 20,000 meters in the space to send a missile killing hundreds of people. To strive against this aggressive attitude or hateful attitude is much harder than fighting in the battlefield itself. Secondly, the Quran and Hadith also use the term jihad. And Hadith in particular, we find that in several Hadith of the Prophet about ijtihad, to refer to a legal process of interpretation of Sharia. Sharia is not the same as jurisprudence or ruling. This is a big mix there. The fundamental moral system on which Islamic law is predicated is called Sharia, the basic guidelines and its ethics. Now, when a jurist is confronted with a contemporary question that is not covered in the highest two authorities in Islam, that is the Quran and the teaching of the Prophet, what does he do? He studies, because of his broad knowledge, all the teaching of Islam in the primary sources, and then try to find some answer to that question. Example, or organ transplant, blood transfusion, stem cell research. There's nothing like that 1400 years ago when the Quran was revealed or the Prophet was alive. The process of thinking about it and the elements and factors like saving life, respect of the body of the deceased, all of the factors involved in a fatwa or religious opinion, you know what's that called? Ijtihad. If you look at the word ijtihad, it includes the three key letters in the root, J, H, D, ijtihad. Ijtihad is called as such because it is exertion. The basic meaning, exertion of maximum intellectual effort to find a solution based on Islam for a new problem. Thirdly, by the text of the Quran, there is social jihad also. What do you mean social jihad? The identical term, or the identical root actually, there are several words in the Quran, come from the same jihad. Actually refer to paying charity to the poor. Chapter 49 in the Quran, verse 15, it describes payment of charity to the poor as jihad. You're making jihad. And it goes back to the original meaning, because you're striving against what? Against miserliness or apathy and lack of concern for those who are in need. In the Quran, in chapter 25, verse 52, it describes the Quran itself as a means of jihad against those who reject God. You tell me, if jihad is violence, use copies of the Quran to hit people on their heads, hardcover. It actually tells the Prophet, don't listen or obey those who reject faith in Allah, and make jihad against them with it, meaning to the Quran. What does it mean, making jihad with the Quran? With the argument, the cogent argument in the Quran about the existence and beneficence of God. Those who are from Arab countries know that it is a common term to use in many countries to say, I'm making jihad with my pen, writing what is truthful. You make jihad with your tongue by communicating the truth, saying the truth, bringing reconciliation between people. That's jihad, a great jihad. There is also another meaning, no question about it, which is jihad or striving in the battlefield, using force. That's one jihad, no question. And actually, because jihad is a broad term, like when you study or you write your research paper to get a good mark, you're making jihad, you know. That's all jihad. That's a broad term. But when the Quran refers also to jihad or striving in the battlefield, sometimes it uses the general term, but actually more technically the term qital, Q-I-T-A-L, means fighting. Qital is the one that is used. But the question here is this: isn't that an unjustified violence? No, it isn't. It isn't according to United Nations Charter. It isn't according to international law. It isn't according to human nature. If we know under what condition it is permitted and how to conduct yourself ethically, according to even not only Islam, even international laws at the present time. When it's allowed. Again, I'm going to offer $1 million, and I'm serious, $1 million. If you show me in the Quran A to Z, any other reason other than these two reasons of waging war, I'm not talking about fighting criminals or arresting those who are killing people. I'm talking about war, communal war. Other than these two conditions, and I'll quote you the Quran from them and tell me if there's a third one. I appreciate it. One is bona fide, unprovoked aggression. Second is severe, underline, not any small, severe form of oppression. Remember when you quoted verse 60 in the Quran that people are not fighting you because of your religion, unprovoked aggression, driving out of your home, oppression, you should deal with them kindly and justly. That means those who are not doing that, those who are not fighting, they are entitled for good treatment. And also it implies that those who are violating this, you have the right to defend yourself. Now that's in chapter 60. Look at the consistency of the Quran. If you look at it as a total picture. In chapter 2 in the Quran, verse 190, this is very close to the exact translation. It says, fight in the way of God. Those who fight against you, but commit no excess or aggression. لا تعتدوا could mean both. Because God doesn't love those who commit aggression, or if he translated excess. And by the way, excess is a kind of aggression. That means if you have a disproportionate response to aggression, 100 eye for one eye, of course that is also forbidden according to the Quran. So here you find a consistency for it. Now, what kind of code of conduct? In fact, in the 21st century, humanity have not been able even to live up to the standard given by the Prophet. Compare that with the Geneva Conventions and various humanitarian laws of war, the ethics of war, when it becomes the lesser of the two evils. What? You would be surprised to hear what the Prophet said 1400 years ago. You cannot hurt a woman, meaning a woman who's not fighting, and women at that time didn't fight. Children, old people, monks, meaning clergy of other religions, even a young man who's not carrying arms, they call it asif, somebody you're hiring to do work, but is not carrying arms or threatening your life. You can't kill a person who's already injured. And many of you have seen it on television in the so-called civilized world today, people mourning and bleeding in the mosque, shot point blank. This is what the cameras caught or the cell phone caught. We don't know what else has not been caught. We've heard about people, bodies being burned, no matter what they were doing, burning the body after the person is killed. We know it. It happened. It was reported widely. And the Prophet said, no, you cannot mutilate the body of the deceased. Actually, if a person is injured, you're morally obligated to try to help. And in Islamic history, we find many examples. Even during the Crusades, when someone went to Richard the Lion-Hearted because he was sick, because Muslims were much advanced in medicine at the time. And he was the enemy who was killing Muslims right and left. Then he said that you cannot kill animals except for food. You cannot cut down trees. You cannot just go on make mischief and destroy what we call today infrastructure of the country. At that time he said, for example, don't poison wells, because the idea is not to punish the innocent people, but to stop only those who are committing the acts of aggression. The third of 6 questions. Some people say, but you might have proved your point, but isn't there an explicit, more than one explicit verse in the Quran that says that Muslims should kill Jews and Christians wherever they find them? You heard that a lot. All this propaganda, unscholarly, just emotional propaganda. Of course, many of you have heard chapter 9, verse 5 in the Quran, the most quoted and abused verse in the Quran. And they say there is a chapter there that says, kill Jews and Christians wherever you find them. The matter is not only a lack of scholarship, but there is a question of intellectual honesty. Number one, that verse in the Quran has absolutely nothing to do with Jews and Christians. And those who know Arabic, open the Quran, chapter 9, verse 5, which they quote only one part of the verse, by the way. It says, kill the mushrikeen in Arabic. The word mushrikeen in Arabic has never been used in the entire Quran A to Z as an adjective. Adjective, not verb, as an adjective describing Jews and Christians. The opposite is true. In the Quran, in Surah 98, verse 1, it makes a clear distinction between two categories of non-Muslims who are not Muslims. لم يقل الذين كفروا, those who rejected Islam are divided into two groups. من أهل الكتاب والمشركين. It says people of the book and the mushrikeen. So even though both of them are rejectors of Islam, which is their right, according to the Quran made a distinction between other people who rejected Islam and Jews and Christians in particular. And you know why? The term people of the book is a complementary term, because it means that no matter how much differences we have with them, like the concept of Trinity or whatever, still they are much closer to Muslims because they base their religion on what they believe to be revealed books or scriptures from God, just as Muslims believe in the Quran as the revelation from God. So the ayah, first of all, even for the sake of intellectual honesty, has nothing to do with Jews and Christians. Some people add that, or some people translate it, says non-believers, and then they put between brackets Jews and Christians, which violates the very basic rules of the Arabic language and the Quranic usage of the term mushrikeen. Secondly, this ayah actually is historically contextual, and it does not say even kill non-believers other than Jews and Christians. Suppose even you say, it's only about idolatrous Arabs. It doesn't say kill any idolatrous Arab because of their idolatry. They're entitled to be idol worshippers. That's not the reason. People only pick and choose, not only verses, sometimes part of verses of the Quran. You know what I call that in the computer language today? The cut and paste approach. Use the cut and paste, and you can prove anything from anywhere. Give me a book in mathematics, I can give you some philosophical treatise, depending how skillfully I cut and paste. That's not the honest approach. The honest approach is to pick any particular topic, peace and war, women, this and that. Bring together all the text in the Quran, all the verses. Bring together also sound hadith or explanation of the Prophet, and then understand it as a whole. This is not a matter of just defending this or that. It's a matter of defending proper scientific, honest research methodology. You don't just pick and choose here and there. This is exactly what happened in that verse. People who are totally ignorant of the historical context, they say, but the Quran says kill the unbeliever wherever you find them. Who are those people? Number one, Arab idolatrous people. If you read just the section, a few verses before and after, what does it say? It gives you the very reason why Muslims were allowed to kill them wherever you find them. One, that they betrayed their treaty, more than once mentioned. They betrayed their treaty. You go back to history, what does it mean? Remember one of the main treaties, peace treaties, that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, signed with the idolatrous Arabs in Mecca when they prevented him and Muslims from making pilgrimage. They prevented them, but he still was interested in peace. He accepted many difficult conditions that is not reciprocal, very hard on Muslims, because he was interested only in one thing, to have them to agree to a period of 10 years of peace that there will be no fighting. That was his prize that he was looking for. And in fact, as a footnote, throughout Islamic history, Islam spread much, much faster during the period of peace than the period of war. Right from the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. He signed the treaty for 10 years. About 18 months down the line, the Arabs, those that the Quran referred to, betrayed their treaty and cold-bloodedly killed innocent people who, of course, assumed there is no fighting, they was not armed, they were just sitting there at night, they killed them all. What we call that today. When you deliberately victimize the innocent people. War crime. War crime, no less. I mean, shouldn't really have any ifs and buts about it. And by the way, throughout the whole history, even, for example, after the ransacking of Baghdad, the conqueror themselves embraced Islam. See, the Mongols. There is no time. The reason is very simple. That Islam cannot thrive and spread and touch people's heart by force, by conviction, and conviction cannot take place unless there is human communication. They listen to others, others listen to them, and that's what happened. During the 18 months when there was peace, it is said that more people entered into the fold of Islam than 15 years before. The toil, the number of followers in 15 years was matched, more than matched, with 18 months of peace. Because in the period of hatred, fighting, and propaganda, people are not willing to listen because their minds are blocked. They can't. It is only when they can communicate that they can realize that this propaganda does not really stand scrutiny. You go again to these verses, and I can spend quite a bit of time. I'll give you a paper of mine I wrote in some detail on the subject. It's about 10,000 words. If you go to Google, just google.ca or .com, and type Muslim and non-Muslim relations. Actually, the first item, if you click on it, will take you directly to the islamonline.net site where the article, just take you straight to the article. It's called Muslim and non-Muslim relations. But I indicated as well that even if you look carefully at these 15 verses, not just pick one, pluck one half verse in the middle, it says, وَهُمْ بَدَأُوكُمْ أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ. It is they, mean those idolatrous Arabs, are the ones who started fighting or aggression against you in the first place. The very same section excludes idolatrous Arabs who did not betray Muslims. It says, except the idolatrous Arabs who did not betray their treaty. Another say, those who had treaty with you near the sacred mosque, so long as they keep their deal, keep also peace with them. So this is just an example of how easily some people say that's a definitive proof of aggressiveness of Islam. Go and kill the unbeliever wherever you find them. And even if that were true, you think of it like, logically speaking, how could minorities have survived under the rule of Islam? Muslims had supreme power in India for centuries and centuries. In Spain, it could have been enough if force was used to bring this country by hook or crook to Islam. It didn't happen. And still in the subcontinent, Indian subcontinent, Muslims are still minority. They're huge numbers, but they're still in minority as compared, for example, with the Hindu and other communities. And as we said earlier, many Muslims throughout history married Jewish or Christian women. And now if they were supposed to be killed, wherever they find, and seized wherever you find them, it is very easy. You can find them in the kitchen, in the bedroom, in the living room. You can seize them and kill them at wedding night and fulfill your so-called religious duty. On the contrary, the Quran in chapter 30 makes it clear that it is a duty of a husband to treat his wife in kindness and love. وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. Kindness and love. And imagine somebody say, honey, the Quran in chapter 30 say, I should be kind to you. So start kissing her and hugging her. But that verse also say, I should chop your head off. All right. There is no war, to put it succinctly. No war allowed in the Western teaching of Islam based on its authentic teaching that allow you to fight simply on the ground of differing religion. Fourth, okay, fine. Maybe Muslims are not told to kill any non-believer, whatever you find them, just put in the street and maybe look at the identification or something, start chopping heads. But Islam is hostile to non-Muslims and especially hostile to Jews and Christians. And those with political agenda against Muslims, they connect it with the current event and what's happening. And look what's happening here, what's happening there. That shows all from the root of all that, not only violence but hatred, is right in the Quran. It's not that there are some bad Muslims. There are bad Christians and bad Jews and bad everyone. But no, it is the Quran that's responsible. Why is that? You know, remember I one time was watching Larry King Live. You know, very famous to be introduced. He's an honest Jew, at least. And after 9/11, he was interviewing a Jewish rabbi from New York, I believe, I forget his name, very well known, major. And he was asking what's happening, why is that violence, why 9/11, flying planes and building and all of that. He said, so he answers him, he said, you see the Quran, the question of violence actually originates, this is not exact, with some more or less, that this violence all comes from the teaching of the Quran. Like I say, Larry King, I say, was an honest Jew and a good professional journalist. He said, like what? So he quotes him, chapter 5, verse 52, and he said, the Quran says, don't take Jews and Christians for friends. Larry King snaps back, and I really admired him for that. He says, but it didn't say kill him. Okay? I mean, if you don't want to get some person or persons as friends, that's not to kill them. But fortunately, he was also interviewing a lady, professor of Islamic study, and I think it was George Washington University at the time, who said something that anyone who's familiar with the Quran would know. Nowhere in the Quran does it say, don't take Jews and Christians for friends, period. And that's another million. That's mistranslation of the words of the Quran. The Quran simply says, don't take them awliya in Arabic. And awliya is more than friends, defenders, allies. If you take the meaning of defenders, anything wrong or hostile to other community that you say, all right, for your defense needs as Muslims, you don't have to depend on others who don't share your faith. Begin with home. Is that wrong if Christians do it or Jews do it? Beginning with your own people, no problem. But that's not even the point. The word awliya here actually in that context mean your defenders and protectors. And I tried to follow the verses in the Quran that use this term or prohibition. One says don't take Jews and Christians for awliya, protectors. Another says don't take the non-believers in Islam as protectors. And you know what I discovered? You'll be surprised. That all of them refer to negative situations. Negative situation, people who are hostile to you. How do you take a person who's hostile to you as your defender? Example, we go back to that learned rabbi. As a learned rabbi, I expected him to have gone at least to the original source. The Quran is available everywhere. He's an intelligent man, learned man, and we know the tradition in Judaism of focusing on learning and scholarship. And he's definitely one of the biggest scholars of Judaism. I would not expect him to have read some propaganda, second-hand material written by someone else. You know, as a researcher, you go back to the sources that are available. That learned rabbi did not bother or knew but ignored that a few verses later, it gives the reason why you should not take Jews and Christians as your protectors. Because it says, وَإِذَا نَادَيْتُمْ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ اتَّخَذُوهَا هُزُوًا وَلَعِبًا. That when you make the call for prayer, the most dear spiritual act to Muslims, the second pillar after testimony of faith, so important. When you make the call for prayer, they mock at you. They joke at you. Tell me of any sensible or sane person who would find someone joking about his spiritual acts and say, oh, but I need you as my protectors. Great, great, intimate friend. That's crazy. So I wonder, couldn't the rabbi see it in the same page? Or did he see it, but there was a different agenda, that the information is twisted or spun out of context? And here are examples, specifics. I don't want just to throw statements like this as an academic. Look at this. Chapter 3. It says, don't take non-believers as your protectors instead of Muslims. Anything wrong with that? Another one, don't do it as an act of hypocrisy, because there is, again, people are not aware of the historical context and events in the life of the Prophet. At the time of the Prophet, when the struggle was going on between the Muslims, persecuted Muslims, and the Meccans, what happened is that the ultimate end of that battle or result was not clear. You know, sometimes you know who's going to win. So one Muslim had some weakness in their faith by the name of Hatib ibn Abi Balta'a. So he tried to make good with both. So he's a Muslim. He's living with Muslims in Medina. But in the meantime, he keep in very close contact with the enemies of Muslims who were fighting and trying to destroy them in Mecca.